kind of getting nervous. No, we can see fine. We're all right.
Good evening. Let me call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of St. Helena for May 12, 2015. The council met in closed session, and I think I'm correct in saying there was no reportable action. All right, then we'll proceed to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Cole, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on our agenda is roll call.
Mayor Galbraith?
Here.
Vice Mayor White?
Here?
Councilmember Kroll?
Yes.
Doring?
Here.
Pitts?
Here.
Our next item is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us on issues not on our agenda. And public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Does anybody wish to speak at public comment? Please.
Thank you.
And please state your name and address.
Sorry.
Thanks, huh? Got it, thanks. Hi, my name's Scott Decker, and, you know, I guess practice makes perfect. Last time I forgot what I was going to say, and I remembered some of it. First of all, I went down to City Hall, and the blonde lady there, she rocks. She's definitely underpaid. She was very nice to me. I would definitely recommend
Let's see if we can keep our focus on issues that you wish to present and not personalities.
I'm sorry. Okay, my question is to Sharon and to the city attorney. I got some buddies coming from Arizona that are vegan, and since Sharon, I believe, owns a winery, I want to know what wineries have vegan wines in St. Helena. Anyways, I think my time's up. Oh, let me give you my email address so that way you can tell me. It's sdecker546@aol.com. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment? All right. Next would be reports by staff and members of the council. Let me begin with the city manager.
Good evening. I have a couple of items to update the council and the community on. First, this is our...
Did you wish to speak at public comment?
Well, I thought that I'm speaking about the Oracle, so
Oh, that will be coming up. That's on the agenda.
I
All
thought
right.
you were talking about
Thank
something
you.
else. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
So just to remind the community, this is the last week of our communication survey with regards to our community engagement program. There are still drop boxes available at the library, City Hall, Rianda House, and the Family Center, and the link is still online on the city's homepage. We're still looking for volunteers to help us with a bike and pedestrian count, and there's information about that also on our website. And then finally, there's a citizens participation question and answer on Sunday, May 17th at 2:30 at the library, and this is an opportunity for residents to learn about volunteer opportunities and how to serve on some of the boards and commissions for the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown?
Nothing from the city attorney.
Ms. Black? Ms. Mitz? Mr. Palmer?
Yes, I do have something to report. I just wanted to give a special thanks to resident Lorraine Stewart and her friends from the yoga class who came out last week and performed some weeding and some bush trimming at the Carnegie building. They actually reached out to the city and asked if they could help in some way, and we were able to get a public works crew out there and supervise the work and have them help out, and it was just a great example of how staff and the residents can work together to improve the community.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Pitts?
Nothing,
Roll.
thank you.
Ms. Doring?
I have nothing.
I do. So last Tuesday at the supervisors meeting, I accepted a proclamation for the Watershed Information Center and Conservancy, which I'm the chair of. And it had to do with this month is Watershed Month for the county. And this Friday, the WIC is sponsoring the Napa County Watershed Symposium, which will be held at City Winery in Napa on Main Street. And that'll be Friday the 15th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And hope a lot of people can show up. And I left some flyers in the back of the room for the symposium.
All right.
So.
I participated in the walker and bicycle count from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. this morning at Hunt Avenue. At least I persuaded myself I could count okay at that hour. The next opportunity is Saturday. There would need to be a training session. That's all on the city website, and I do hope more will volunteer. The information's important to gather. Thank you. So that brings us to presentations and public recognitions, and we have 2 proclamations this evening. Good. And Ms. Lopez? Great. So I'm going to read the proclamation, and then you'll have an opportunity to say a few words after I've read the proclamation. And this is a proclamation for Mental Health Month, May 2015. Whereas 1 in 4 individuals will experience mental health issues in their lifetimes, which can affect parents, sisters, brothers, spouses, co-workers, and others in our lives. And whereas the Mental Health Division seeks to reduce barriers to access, improve community outreach that ensures culturally and linguistically competent care to diverse communities through culturally competent services. And whereas, while there is still much work to be done to eliminate disparities in services and increase education about mental illness, Napa County service providers are to be commended for their collaborative approach when working with individuals in need. And whereas there is a strong body of research documenting that with support and treatment, between 70 and 90% of individuals with mental illness have a significant reduction in symptoms and improved quality of life. And whereas the Mental Health Division and other community providers have sponsored suicide prevention events, and statistics show that awareness, education, and action do save lives and prevent suicides. And whereas every Napa County resident can be an ally by learning about and dispelling the myths about related mental illness and eliminating stigma by treating individuals with mental illness with respect. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, do hereby proclaim May 2015 as Mental Health Month in St. Helena. As the Mayor, I also call upon the citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools in St. Helena to recommit ourselves and our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, to supporting our community members so that they can take action to protect their mental health, and to promote appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental health conditions. So, very good. And if you would like to say a couple of words, that would be wonderful. And here's your proclamation.
Thank you.
Right.
Sure. Mayor Galbraith, Vice Mayor White, and City Council members and staff, and members of the public, we appreciate your support in recognizing May as Mental Health Month. As the proclamation illustrates, mental illness and mental health issues are pretty common, but generally stigmatized and discriminated to the point at which we are uncomfortable talking about them. And this is really a public education campaign to raise that awareness, to be more effective in intervening earlier and more effectively with individuals who have this illness. Along with a number of community partners, I want to introduce Indira Lopez from the FLA Family Center, a very important partner for us in this effort. They're doing some great work, and she's got some words to say too. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Galbraith and honorable members of the San Helena City Council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Indira Lopez, and I am the program director of the Valley Family Centers. For many of you, formerly known as the Calistoga Family Center and the San Helena Family Center. I'm very honored to be here for the proclamation dedicating May as the Mental Health Month. Mental Health Month has been in existence since 1949, and during this month, many organizations get together to send a message of health and hope. Did you know that 1 in 5 American adults have a diagnosable mental health condition in any given year? And did you know that 50% of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition sometime in their life? And half of those people will develop conditions by the age of 14 years old? Valley Family Centers are committed to help the community become aware of mental health resources and reducing stigma and discrimination on mental health issues. Some of the activities that we are sponsoring this month include our Promotora program, which is composed by a group of 11 women volunteers in this community, put together an informational meeting at the Presbyterian Church here in San Helena last week. Community members learn how to reduce stigma and discrimination on mental health and also how to take care of themselves in the process. On May 27, in coordination with the On the Move and the Innovations Project, we will provide mental health assessments, laughter yoga, and other activities in the campus of the Calistoga Elementary School. The idea is to promote mental health wellness and to introduce to the community a traveling resource van that will go to the more isolated parts of the county, bringing resources and information. I also brought some information about Mental Health Month put together by the Mental Health America organization, and then also a calendar of all the events that are taking place around the county. So I want to leave it in the back table and for anybody to take some of the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, our next proclamation is for the 55th Annual National Public Works Week. I must say I consider every week to be Public Works Week, but apparently this one is being singled out. So this proclamation is presented to the St. Helena Public Works Department. Glenn, are you going to receive it?
I think we all are.
You all are? Well, please stand up and and I will read it. Terrific. Whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewer, streets, and highways, public buildings, and solid waste collection, and whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, are vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of Public Works crews, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff Public Works Department is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform, and whereas the year 2015 marks the 55th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, and now therefore be it resolved that the St. Helena City Council, city staff, and the citizens of St. Helena do hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through May 23, 2015 as National Public Works Week, and encourage all citizens to join us in this worthy observance. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Do you want to say a few words?
No, other than this being recognized as an honor.
You know, I just wanted to step up and just give my own recognition to our crews and say thanks for all the hard work they do. A lot of it people don't see and they don't recognize how often they work, how hard they work, and they're out today in the hot sun and taking care of our infrastructure. So it's greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Our next series of items are our consent items, and again, any member of the council or any member of the public can pull any item on the consent calendar, and it will then be discussed by the council. 10, consideration and proposed approval of regular and special meeting minutes of September 23, 2014, October 14, 2014, October 28, 2014. 11, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution regulating the use of public property for the St. Helena Chamber of Commerce musical picnic in Lyland Park events. 12, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution regulating the use of public property to include mobile food vendors for the St. Helena Recreation Department Summer Series for special events in 2015. 13, FEMA OES refund update. Does anybody wish to pull any of these items? Then I'd entertain a motion to approve consent items 10 through 13.
Move to approve.
I second. I just wonder if does 10 need to be bifurcated out since only 3 of us?
I believe the city attorney provided advice that on this type of routine matter, we were all entitled to vote.
And very briefly, I'd just like to add into the record for items 11 and 12, regulation of the use of public property has been determined to be exempt from further review under CEQA, as these actions qualify for a Class 1 categorical exemption under Section 15301 and Class 21 categorical exemption under Section 15321 of CEQA. And so for 11 and 12, the CEQA status should have been exempt.
All right. Ms. Black? Roll call?
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Kroll,
Yes.
Doring,
Yes.
Pitts,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. Our next item is a public hearing item, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving the sale of public property known as 684 McCorkle Avenue as being consistent with the public interest and convenience in finding the sale exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Ms. Phillips, your lead staff on that.
Thank you very much. I bring before you an approval of the sale of an existing 23,000 square foot city-owned parcel located at 684 McCorkle. Currently, the parcel is zoned high density and was purchased with Affordable Housing Trust Fund monies with the intent to build affordable housing units on this site. Staff is recommending the sale of the parcel to Our Town St. Helena, who in cooperation with the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, RCAC, is working with the USDA Rural Development Mutual Self-Help Program to secure a technical assistance grant to build affordable housing units at this site. the city sells the property to Our Town St. Helena, the program would work to build a minimum of 6 affordable housing units, which would be funded through the 502 Self-Help Loan Program. Qualified and selected participants are required to provide 65% of the labor to build the houses, with the loan covering the cost of materials and the remaining 35%. I'd like to make one quick clarification. There's an inconsistency between the resolution and the staff report. And the clarification is that approval by December 2016 of these units satisfies requirement of the Calderon settlement, and it's the approval, whereas the staff report states development satisfies the settlement agreement. So it's approval, not development. And the approval is the correct wording. Very briefly, if I can just highlight some of the terms of the agreement, and then I'd be happy to answer questions. The proposed sale of the property is for the purchase price of $1. Our Town St. Helena must have financial commitments from USDA for both the 523 technical grant to manage the project and the 502 loans prior to the close of escrow. Declaration of restricted covenants must be filed prior to the close of escrow. That's so we ensure that this property remains affordable for as long as the law allows and the grants allow. It's 180 days to close the escrow, and there's an option for one additional 180-day period for a total of 1 year. Our Town St. Helena and the city are splitting the closing costs for the sale of this property. There's a mutual indemnity, and there are no liquidated damages for either party. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, are there any initial questions of members of the council? All right, let me open it up for public comment.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Gills. My husband Glenn and I own the property at 645 McCorkle Avenue, just down the street from the city-owned property. And I'm here tonight not to oppose the development. However, we do support the development of the Sweat Equity property with our request, and the majority of my neighbors who I've spoken to have requested not to exceed 6 units. And those 6 units should have parking available to them without parking on the street. You'll see a picture that was provided to each one of you this evening, council members, that was taken by one of our neighbors, Barry Berkowitz. He took that picture this morning at just past 7, and that is coming off of Kid Ranch Road and going east on McCorkle down towards where I live, and it is nonstop parking, and those parking spaces are being taken up by the apartment complex that's there. So we have no more room, the low-income apartment complex that's currently there on McCorkle. So we have a parking problem already, and we want to ensure that there's no additional cars parking on McCorkle. And that being said, on garbage day, which was this morning, the garbage cans coming out from the apartment complex take up probably 6 spaces, and so the parking problem just continues on down the street. And all of that being said, we are disappointed as neighbors that the property that is owned by the city has not been maintained during its vacancy. It is completely overgrown with weeds, and there's a big broken limb that's fallen off a neighboring tree. And since it's been vacant for I don't know how long, nearly probably 9 months, it's completely become overgrown. So I just wanted to make that point as well. So I think that's it. Again, we're not opposed, but we'd like to see it not to exceed 6 units.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment?
Yes, my name is Bobby Monette, and I'm speaking as a citizen. I'm just, if it's easy to answer, it may not be, but I was just wondering, when you said it would be affordable for as long as the law and the grants allow, is there, do you have any sense, or can you communicate any sense of how long that is, or I'm not sure if that's answered.
We generally strive for 55 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Stevenson, representing Our Town St. Helena. We're the Affordable Housing Advocacy Group here in St. Helena, and we're a 501(c) nonprofit, and we have an opportunity to build 18 self-help houses in St. Helena over the next few years, and we'd like to put the first 6 to 8 of those on McCorkle site. We've qualified for a Department of Agriculture Rural Development Grant, which is just around $500,000 to administer this project. Rural Development has built 50,000 self-help homes in the last 50 years. They know what they're doing, and we're very pleased to be one of their approved nonprofit organizations. RCAC, who's represented by Erica Holzhauer here tonight, is a very well-respected nonprofit who is our liaison with the federal government and will also be our technical advisor on this project. You all know that there's a need for affordable housing in St. Helena. The mean price for a house in April was over $1 million. The median income is under $100,000 by quite a bit. We're having ongoing displacement of middle and lower class home ownership, while we're building larger homes on lots which will never ever be employee housing again. 78% of our workers commute into town now, and there's very little rental property available, particularly for families that need more than a studio or a guest house apartment. There's also a real desire for affordable housing. We had our first informational meeting on this project last Thursday night, and we really blew it because we didn't get it in the paper and we didn't get our flyers distributed till the day before, and we had over 60 people show up. They represented over 50 families. 90 by a hand vote, at least 95% of them lived or worked in St. Helena and Calistoga, lived in St. Helena and Calistoga and worked in St. Helena and Calistoga. These are not people coming in from the outside. The ones who did not live in St. Helena lived in American Canyon and Napa, but worked up valley. By the way, we're having another informational meeting next Wednesday, May 20th, 6 to 8 in the Catholic School Gymnasium, so we can have more people learn about the program and try to qualify for the home ownership. Our goal is to gain site control because of McCorkle, because we need site control in order to get this first round of funding, this first $500,000, and we need to do it fairly quickly. We need to do it by midsummer. Our next step will be to meet with the McCorkle neighbors. We know a lot of them, respect them, we understand their concerns about parking and density, and our plan is to make these houses fit within the existing neighborhood and be good neighbors. Just have one more point, I think. The project makes sense. There's an overwhelming need for housing in St. Helena. We all know that. We think this is the best and highest use for this particular piece of land. It will fit into the neighborhood well. It will help the city meet its requirements for the Caleron settlement. It's an infill housing project, which I know brings smiles to many of your faces. And we have the right partners involved, and we have good funding scenarios. So we think this makes a lot of sense, and we hope you do too. And lastly, I'd just like to do a shout out to Jennifer Phillips and John Brown and Eric Heacock and the other people in the city who helped us put this together. We came to them just a few weeks ago when they were knee-deep in budget and everything else and said, "You think we can do this on short order?" And they made it happen. So we really look forward to working with them in the future on this project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any further public comment?
Good evening. My name is Jasenia. I am a resident of St. Helena. I also am the resident manager for Huntsgrove Apartments, where since April 16th, they froze our wait list because we have over 75 applications on our wait list and about 60 applications in our Calistoga office. So there's a great need for housing, and I think that this program will make a lot of sense. A lot of the existing owners can move into home ownership, and then that can give more room to people to rent. And again, this is affordable. I also wanted to mention that we have a website that is up and it's informational. We're also on Facebook. We have information in English and Spanish. And we also have begun the process of handing out the pre-applications where we're looking for families' income and size. And being a manager of Hansgrove Apartments, I am very aware of the parking problems and the garbage and all of that. So I'm hoping that we've had a lot of positive feedback now from our neighbors at Hansgrove, and we hope to start educating and minimize those problems. I also want to mention that there's a lot of families that are very interested, and they've been following us for years, for at least the last 3 years, been coming to meetings and informational meetings. So I'd like just to show to the public, if I can ask them to stand up and so you can see some of their faces. Si les puedo decir a las personas que se levanten, los que están queriendo apoyar el proyecto de Affordable Housing, por favor.
Okay, good.
So some of these people are people that I've met with, that I know they would qualify. And
You can sit.
sit down. Gracias. And so I'm just as excited as they are because they've been renting for 15, 20 years, and I think they're ready. And they just, otherwise they couldn't afford anything in St. Helena, where they've been living for the last 10, 15 years. So I thank you very much for your time and effort in this subject. Thank you.
Yesenia, could you, I'm not sure if you know about it, but could you briefly talk about the history of sweat equity housing in St. Helena? Are you familiar enough to speak a little bit about our history?
I know a little bit about it.
Okay.
Voorhees Circle, we call them the Marietta Home Project. I believe there's 9 units in there that were constructed, I believe, around 1997. And that was I believe the second self-help project in St. Helena. And again, that was about 17, 18 years ago. And so ever since, there hasn't been anything built in there. Our town, St. Helena, was gladly involved in helping the Hernandez family, where they had one of the members was disabled, and they assisted with making like an elevator type of chair where the Miss Hernandez could go up and shower and do regular stuff.
All right, good.
So
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any further public comment? All right, let me open it up to council discussion. Just pertinent to your last point, I believe that the El Bonita housing at the end up there was also sweat equity housing. And that may have been the first project, I don't know.
1950s.
1950s. I know families have been there a long time, maybe 60s, whatever, yeah. All right. Council discussion?
I think it's a fantastic project. I think it's exactly what we were envisioning when we bought that project. One thing that we heard from the community was that people were interested in home ownership, and I think this is the perfect project for that. I think that if 8 units work, that would be fantastic. So I wouldn't want to limit them to 6, but it seems like the perfect project. I really hope it gets off the ground. I'm wondering if there's going to be a lottery system and everybody fills out pre-application process, and then is it going to be a lottery type system? No. Anyway, I think congratulations. I think it's a great project. I hope it happens.
I think it's important to note that we are not making necessarily planning decisions right now. That's not part of our purview, but that this project, if it gets off the ground, will go through the normal planning process.
Right.
Yes.
I just was responding to a comment.
I should mention, I'm sorry, I just want to mention apropos of Councilmember Doring's comment is that both the resolution and the agreement itself make clear that there is no prejudgment happening here and that a full and participatory, transparent public process will take place before any decision is made on the actual entitlements.
And probably it doesn't need to be said, but this sale is contingent on that process happening in a positive outcome and approval of a project, right? I'm fully supportive of this project. I do think we should look at a practical way to make sure that we don't exacerbate the parking problem. And I think as long as we're committed to working with the project sponsors to ensure that we don't have an issue, that's the one sensitivity I hear. Fully supportive, and I think we should move forward.
I understand that the intent would be a homeowners association out there, and I think that might be one of the the elements in the bylaws, and we're, in a way, it's a good thing to be at the beginning of it in developing those bylaws, because we can put language in there that addresses parking as well as many other issues.
Mr. White?
I am fully in favor of this. Congratulations, our town, for being able to bring in the type of funding that can actually get something off the ground. So I'm all for it. And
All right. I have really very little to add. I did go down and look at the site. I think it was about 7 a.m. Sunday morning, so I can say from looking at the site that the photograph with the parked cars is certainly representative, and I'm sure that will be on everybody's minds as the planning process proceeds. Certainly, the city's made it very clear that this will go through a transparent planning process. Nothing's been prejudged. And at this stage, I am certainly fully supportive. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
So, move to approve the resolution approving the sale of public property known as 684 McCorkle Avenue and finding the sale exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
Second it.
Ms. Black?
And then do we also have to approve the purchase agreement separately, or?
The single resolution that's before you,
Okay.
I believe there is an amended resolution that's before the council, and that single resolution will incorporate all of the actions you need to take.
Okay, so the amended resolution.
All right.
Second.
Oh, I
Was there a second? I'm
seconded.
sorry, I didn't hear you.
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
That's all right.
Such a delay there that I forgot about it.
We enjoy double seconds.
Sorry.
Yeah, double, triple.
Third.
Go ahead.
Vice Mayor White.
Yes.
Councilmember Kroll.
Yes.
Pitts.
Yes.
Doring.
Yes.
Mayor Guthrie.
Yes. All right, that takes us to the final item on our agenda. Maybe I'll pause for just a moment since folks may wish to leave at this point.
If I could just mention, I wanted to apologize for not properly maintaining the McCorkle project and the property. So the Public Works Director and I are already all over that. So I'm sorry about that. Thank you for letting us know, and we'll take care of it.
We're going to pause for just a minute here. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Okay, this takes us to item 15, discussion and possible direction to St. Helena representative to Upper Valley Waste Management Authority related to proposal from Upper Valley Disposal and Clover Flat Landfill for rate increase and franchise term exemption. Ms. Phillips, you're the lead staff.
Thank you very much. I placed this item on the agenda. Our representative, or your representative to the the Upper Valley Waste Management Authority is Councilmember Kroll. We are serviced by Upper Valley Disposal and utilize the Clover Flat Landfill. And so it's the JPA, the authority, that makes the decisions with regards to the franchise agreement and any waste management issues here in Upper Valley, Napa. But there was an issue that came before the board in April, and it had to do with the extension of a proposed extension to the franchise agreement as well as potential rate increases. And so I thought it would be helpful. Waste management is a very complicated topic. It's very near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of experience in it and know how important it is to the community, the important services, especially with sustainability goals that we all have as communities, and moving into the future to start making commitments towards 2035 and 2045, that it would be nice for the council to also have the opportunity to receive some information. I was graciously saved from having to make the presentation myself. Upper Valley Disposal offered to come and do a condensed version of the presentation that they made in April to the Management Authority. And so we've allowed them to come and use maybe 7 or 10 minutes of the council's time to present the presentation and then to be able to answer any questions, general questions that the council may have. Part of the discussion is if you feel that there's information that you can direct your voting representative to request information, look at a process, or indicate any kind of preference that the council may have, this would also be an opportunity to do that. So with that, if it's the council's pleasure, then we can turn it over for the presentation.
All right, let's start with the presentation.
Thank you very much. Bryce Howard, representing Upper Valley Disposal Services. So we did a presentation back April 20th to the JPA, and what really stimulated that presentation was, let me get to that slide so we can get to that. Click right. We were faced with a situation where we had to have a fairly large capital influx, and we were looking at replacing something to 7 to 8 trucks, which is a fairly significant amount of money when you're looking at $350,000 to $400,000 per truck. At the exact same time, there were some new regulations that were coming down that were increasing our closure costs and post-closure costs funding mechanism out at the landfill. And both those things sort of drove us towards, and the July 1 rate review process, where the agency looks at our rates and says, should there be a rate increase or shouldn't there be a rate increase on July 1? And we looked at those two pieces, a very substantial truck purchase and a very substantial increase potentially for new regulations at the landfill, as an opportunity to come and say, should we have those rate increases or should we do something different? So our proposal is pretty simple. We are looking at investing about $9 million of our money, completely funded by us, in what we would call sustainable sort of initiatives. And I'll get to those in a while. But the two big ones are replacing our diesel trucks with CNG, natural gas. And so we would put in a natural gas fueling station and purchase those CNG trucks, all on our dime. Also, we'd have an increase in organics recycling. And because of that investment by us, and because of us asking for an extension of time on our current waste disposal agreements and our current collection agreements, we would see no residential or commercial rate increase in 2015 or 16. And the outcome of that is lower greenhouse gas emissions, increased diversion, and some reduced traffic. Our system is one of the lucky things about this area, if you want to call it that. We are fully integrated here up in this Upper Valley. We have a landfill, we have a MRF, we have a composting facility, we have a landfill, and we even have energy recovery now at our landfill as well. We have a landfill that has 30 years life remaining, and we're also producing some renewable power out there as well, which we started this last summer. We have a materials recovery facility. That facility recovers about 15 different categories. We're currently at about 70% diversion right now. We have a C&D recycling facility. Wow. We have a C&D recycling facility up at the landfill as well. Does about 9 different categories. We get about 50% diversion on that facility, so we push all the public, all our commercial, all of our sort of industrial debris boxes through there, and we get about 50% diversion out of that facility. We have a composting facility at our corporation yard off of Whitehall Lane. It does about 12,000 tons a year of compost. Point. We have a drop-off center, buyback center up at the landfill. And we also have a new landfill gas power station we have up there, which converts landfill gas into 0.8 megawatts of renewable power, which we invested $3 million into and paid for that all by ourselves.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think most people don't know about that.
Sure. So the power station was something that quite a few larger landfills and larger communities have been doing for decades, really. But on a very small scale, at a very small landfill like ours, it's very unusual. Most landfills our size, or the amount of inflow we have, just flare the gas into the atmosphere, basically destroying all the particulates and all the sort of bad stuff that comes out of landfill gas. But our company decided to actually invest our own money. We felt like it was going to pay for itself. It will turn a profit eventually, something like 8 or 9 years from now. But it was something we thought was important. So that was our investment at that time. We provide the typical collection services, lots of different services for commercial and residential. One thing we are proposing in this proposal we submitted to the JPA was to do co-collected food waste collection in our green waste operation. We'd like to start that in September, hopefully. What sort of stimulated all of this? One of the things was this large truck purchase. The other one were new regulations. These are the typical sort of agencies that regulate us, and the big push was on the air side. A lot of new air regulations coming down that force us to get new trucks, whether they're new diesel trucks or whether they're CNG trucks. That is what's sort of one of the big drivers here. The other big driver is the landfill closure. Landfill closure is something where we are required by the state of California to put money aside for closure that may happen 20 or 30 years from now, and then post-closure for another 30 years after that. That process of calculating how much money that should be put away, set aside, changed recently, and therefore that amount went up significantly that we had to put aside. It's not really associated with new wells or new monitoring or new controls. It's associated with how you pay for that closure, how it's calculated. The state of California decided that they want us to put enough money aside in case Caltrans had to come in and redo that closure, in case the state had to actually come in and do it. One of the other interesting things about this closure fund in particular is this money is actually put away by us. It's part of our requirement to put that away, but it's really money for the agency. It's there in trust for the agency. So a couple of things that we're proposing. One is a biomass gasification plant, which is a 1 megawatt renewable power gasification facility. It takes wood chips and basically incinerates them, but does it in a way that it doesn't produce any pollution that comes off it. It gasifies them. And it's about a $5.5 million investment by the company, completely funded by us, outside the rates of any of the citizens.
What is TPD?
Tons per day. So basically, those tons per day currently are all shipped out of the county right now to Rio Bravo out by Sacramento and really used for the exact same purpose out there in a very large facility. Once again, that'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And there's also a byproduct called biochar, which is really sort of a charcoal type product, and it's used a lot of times in filtration, either in wastewater treatment plants, or you can even add it into composting. It acts as sort of a sequester of water. It sort of absorbs the liquid in and then time releases it over time. One of the other major aspects of what we're looking at is instead of going out and purchasing 7 or 8 diesel trucks this next fiscal year, we'd like to put in a CNG fueling station. Once again, that fueling station would be all on us. We would fund it that completely outside the rate model, outside any rates that would hit the citizens. That's a $1 million investment by us. We'd also look at trying to build something, if it was wanted by the community, to make part of that fueling station at least municipally public, if somebody had some interest in buses or trucks or some of their fueling needs. Our truck fleet conversion. So trucks cost $350,000 or so per truck. It costs about another $40,000 a truck to convert it into CNG or to bring it from the factory that way. We would suggest, or we would propose that extra amount is all paid for by the company, where the other basic amount actually fits into the rate model. So it's about an $800,000 investment for us. Diesel's about 23% less greenhouse gases. CNG is about 23% less greenhouse gases than diesel. Plus, they're a little quieter, the trucks are on the streets. Solar power. We would like to add a $1 million solar power on top of our materials recovery facility. Once again, we would pay for that 100% by ourselves. It's a 0.5 megawatts of renewable power. One of the last piece here is we currently use a diesel grinder up at the landfill to grind up those wood chips that we send off site. We'd like to put an electric grinder up there. Would run off that renewable power that we already produce. That's about a $700,000 investment. Once again, completely paid for by the company. So our proposal will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce traffic, increase diversion, with a fairly significant increase in renewable power of what we currently produce now. All of these are 100% financed by the company. No impact to the ratepayer on any of these initiatives. You can see it's a $9 million investment by us. There's some additional improvements that we also would like to do, and some of these are already sort of envisioned by the agency. Landfill front entrance is $1.4 million. That's about a 50% split, 50% on the agency, or fits into the rate model that we have, and 50% would be paid 100% by us. Stormwater retention pond is another one that's split 50-50. The organics blending barn is a $500,000 investment. It's really there to handle organics at our Whitehall Lane facility, and we would need that to go forward with a more sort of robust organics recycling program. So the financial comparison on this, so what took place last April 20th when we submitted this? We were submitting either two basic different rate processes. One is if we go forward with our existing rate model and our existing proposal or existing agreement, we were looking at about a 4.5% rate increase and about a 15 per ton dollar increase out at the landfill. Landfill currently charges $71.34 a ton. So based on what we saw purchasing these diesel trucks, based on those new regulations for landfill closure, we saw a $15 per ton rate increase, very significant in our mind, 20% out at the landfill, and then a 4.5% rate increase on the residential commercial in this next fiscal year. What we're proposing is basically to flatten that out. So we're proposing a 20-year extension will basically flatten out those costs. And on top of that, I would say the critical piece of that 20-year extension is those sustainability goals actually can be paid for and financed and amortized over the life of that 20 to 30 years, and therefore they're actually something we can do. If we don't get that extension, then those things are basically financially impractical to do. So we presented to the agency, as we're required to, a submittal that says, here's the current agreement, and here's what we believe the rate impacts were going to be, and here's an alternate agreement that we think might be a beneficial or something that the community might like. You punched me to the last slide, or the one before the last slide? Mm-hmm. Sure. There we go. So the overall comparison between our two proposals was the one on the right is really what we submitted. That's our official submittal, and that is a 4.5% residential increase this next fiscal year, $15 per ton rate increase this next fiscal year. And our proposals on the left, we're asking for a 20-year extension on our current agreement. We would provide those sustainable initiatives at $9 million cost to us, and there would be no residential increase this next year, and the rate increase on the landfill would drop to $4.50, basically a third, because we're going from 10 years to 30 years. And so what we're going to do is on the this next coming Monday, on May 18th, there'll be another agency meeting, and we'll be proposing to that agency at that time to take some time to think about this initiative, to postpone any rate increase or any rate change on July 1, but postpone that for 6 months, maybe 12 months, to give the agency some time to review both proposals. And then at that time, after that review, make a decision on which direction we need to go. Thank you for your time.
Good.
Thank you.
I have a question. And thank you for this presentation, a lot of information. I think it'd be really helpful, at least for me, to understand, well, while no increase in 2015, 2016 sounds great, what does it look like after that when we're talking about 20 years, and how does that compare to the compounded growth in rate under the, either under the existing agreement? I mean, that's something I think we need to consider. I don't know if you have that information here with you, but I'd love to see it if you don't.
I don't really have that, but I think that is a good idea. We've done some forecasting, let's say over the next 10 to 15 years of capital needs and how that affects the overall rates. And that was one of the things that brought us to the conclusion that we need to extend that horizon, because we saw not just this year, but 3-4 years out, another big bump in rates and another big influx based on just the capital we saw coming in. The challenge with this is that regulations can change at any moment or any time, and that can push the rates around. But that happens for everyone, whether it's this community or any community. But certainly, where we go forward, some projection of that. What we do produce for the agency is a 3-year projection of capital, what we're going to spend in capital, which factors in the rates. But some sort of long-term projection would be something we could probably put together for you. On the landfill side, that is a CPI rate. So that rate of 71.34 goes up by CPI each year, unless there's a significant regulatory state-mandated change. Then we're allowed to pass that through into the rates.
Okay.
On the collection side, there hasn't been a rate increase for 3 years, but it certainly doesn't mean that there isn't going to be one in the future.
Right.
I think the point, Greg, too, is that we can give direction to our representative, because I think these things are going to be hashed out at another level. So I'm not sure
Well, let
if that's your intent.
me complete the public hearing first. Does anybody else wish to speak at public hearing before I close the public hearing?
Good evening, Mayor Galbraith and City Council. I'm Jerry Gill. I'm CEO of Sustainable Napa County, and we have a long history of supporting the efforts at Clover Flat Resource Recovery Park, as it's now known. We've taken tours out there and walked around with hard hats and got our boots dirty, and we're actually very excited about that. Sustainable Napa County is really operating where the 3 E's of sustainability come together, and that is environment, economy, and the community. And we think that this project and this plan really does also come together at that convergence, and it really helps accomplish multiple goals. First and foremost, the city's own climate action element of the draft general plan. It's really the guiding policy of this community and what we and you hope to accomplish as a community countywide and also as a region. Beyond that, yet closely aligned, is that this really helps the city of St. Helena and surrounding communities who are part of this partnership stay ahead of things that are coming to us from outside of our community at the state level, responding to those things in a very customized, community-driven, community-responsive way, and working with partners to make that happen, specifically in the areas of renewable energy and waste diversion and also greenhouse gas emission reductions. I think we're all seeing that these continue to, as Bryce said, change throughout, and so we need to be able to be nimble and respond to those. And so if we're ahead of those, we're even better off. For the waste partner, certainly, having the regulatory pieces come together, but also the assurance from other partners and this community that their investment over time is really going to make a difference. I think that is one of the key pieces to us, too, is seeing that we have a strong partner in our community with waste management so that things can be accomplished that matter to all of us, not just specific to waste hauling and our bins on the curb, but really the broader goals that we've talked about with respect to climate action and renewable energy and water conservation and waste diversion and trying to get ahead of all of those things. So I just want to encourage you to have a hearty discussion about this and direct your representative to ask good questions, but I just wanted to be on the record that we are wholeheartedly behind this, and just simply, it's really cool. All these things coming together is very cool, so thank you for your time. If you have any questions,
thank you.
Stand up. Much. All right, any further comment at public hearing? Then I'll close the public hearing and invite council discussion. Mr. Doring?
A couple of things occurred to me. I don't have a real good sense of who the users are and if the costs are allocated, how they're allocated to the municipalities, the members of the authority, as opposed to other users, commercial users, other people who are outside of the public entity. I'd like to see more of an exploration to make sure that the costs are allocated appropriately and fairly to all users of the entity. I'd like to see a better analysis probably in terms of the infrastructure costs that are being undertaken now potentially can generate more revenue for the company, energy production, those kinds of things. I'd like to see how St. Helena benefits from that. I'm sure St. Helena will benefit from that, but I don't know how. all those infrastructure costs, all the money that's being put into anything that creates energy or renewables, that helps us. So I'd like to see more of an analysis there. And I guess the final thing I'd like to see is an independent analysis. Some other company. Obviously, it's a great report, but it's not independent. And so we want to make sure that we, as in the authority and the agency, do our due diligence to make sure that some other independent group can look at these numbers, see if they make sense over time.
Mr. White?
Okay, I'll ditto that, and I'd also like to see, I agree with Jerry that, there's a lot of benefit for our community. How do we quantify that so we can see that we're actually meeting the goals that we, as St. Helena as a jurisdiction has to meet, as far as state regulations and such. And maybe that's part of the program going forward that we have to take a look at and make sure that we're meeting those goals and actually being able to document it. So, excuse me, so that we can make sure that we're taking care of the policies that we put in our general plan, and also if I'm correct, SB 32, there was a lot of regulations that came out that communities need to meet. And I guess the direction for Sharon would be to ask all the questions that have been asked and make sure that. And I do agree, that we should have some kind of outside look at the whole program and make sure that the rates are equitable across the board and such.
Well, I have a
yes.
I have a quick question for Ms. Kroll, and that is, what staff does the agency use to review a rate submission and to provide an assessment as to whether the rates that are being presented are just and reasonable to the rate payer?
Well, we have an outside auditor, and that looks at the books. The agency is the staff work is done by Napa County Environmental. The Public Works Director actually does the staff work, and the city and the attorney from Napa also. But I guess I don't really understand exactly what you're wondering. Whether who's like do we have an outside? We go through a process where we look at the costs and the what it costs to provide that kind of service, and there's all different variations in different. I guess maybe we should start back with the members of the JPA are the cities and the county. The county is a separate member, not the city of Napa, but Calistoga, St. Helena, Yountville, and the county. And each entity is represented on the board. So we go through the rate structure process happens like the cities in July. And we haven't had a rate increase over the past 3 years. We go through a process where we look at we assess the costs and different communities, mostly the county. It's sort of a flexible. I guess I don't really understand what you're saying.
Well, I think what I'm used to, perhaps having practiced a couple of times before the Federal Power Commission and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is a staff report that analyzes the applicant's submission. These are folks that are really expert at looking at rate increases and the methodology and assessing whether it is or is not just and reasonable to the rate payer, and providing a recommendation. It seems to me, especially in the context of a term extension, which is for a long period of time, that would be an appropriate process. And the question I have is whether your authority has that type of expertise available to it.
The county staff provides that expertise.
And I guess I don't know, and I would like our staff to look at this issue as well and see whether it's satisfied that the county staff has the expertise to do it. I think here we have a real due diligence obligation as a city council. The other thing that bothers me a little bit, not bothers me, I think the program is great. Look, I've got no issue with the environmental program at all. It all sounds terrific to me. But I also didn't hear any discussion of the impact of these trucks on us. These are heavy trucks. They go over our streets. My thinking would be that cities who grant franchises also get a fee for the wear and tear on their public facilities from the trucks, which should be passed back to the ratepayer.
Some cities do have a franchise fee.
Well, do we?
No,
well,
we do not.
It seems to me that needs to be part of the discussion.
One other piece that I would add, and I don't know if anyone else does this, but if we're agreeing to such a long term, is there any room to discuss caps on increases over time?
Again, I think that's for your voting representative to have those discussions as a member of the board, and as this item comes forward. In response to the mayor's question, we don't have the staffing capacity nor the expertise, but I think that I'd be happy to reach out to Yountville and to Calistoga and to see if they would be interested in hiring a consultant for the three of us to review this proposal.
And the county.
In the county.
County is one of the members as well.
Well,
I understand, but the county has its own staff to review, and so for the small cities, sometimes the county's perspective is different than what the small cities are looking for. So my personal recommendation would be that it would be the three small cities.
Well, I would certainly encourage you to pursue that option with the other two cities.
We need to make sure that what we're doing fits in with the organizational structure that already exists. I assume, right, and that it's not in conflict with, as long as it's not in conflict with the structure and the purpose of the organization, the authority itself, we want to make sure that we...
Certainly.
Yeah.
And we don't have a proposal yet, so there's nothing to review at this point, and so I would work with the representative and certainly the executive director and identify when that proposal comes through and what kind of analysis they're doing, but I'd be happy to look at those things when the time is right.
One of the problems with caps in this situation is that the state is constantly imposing more regulations, which are unpredictable.
Well, and I agree with that. And, you know, the whole point of a process where you're assessing rates and figuring out whether they're just and reasonable, I mean, that's the reason you do it. It's precisely a process you go through periodically and assure yourself that it's fair to the company and fair to the public. And I don't see that, to me, caps in that situation are an artificial constraint.
But if you're locking into 20 years and you can't renegotiate that agreement in any way, shape, or form, and it's not a competitive process, right?
But that's why you have rate setting and a public body that sits over the company. That's always true with respect to major public utilities like natural gas pipelines, for example, or electric power lines. That's the whole philosophy behind the Natural Gas Act, the Federal Power Act, and many other federal statutes. And you have regulatory bodies that undertake to assess whether rates are just and reasonable. And they get fixed for a period of time, and then they get reopened and reassessed.
So is that to say that the body that you sit on actually has the power to do that?
We evaluate the rates every year.
Okay.
But we do not, and I agree with Alan, caps are, I don't think caps are a viable option because it is an annual assessment and it's not, and there are variables that are out of, that are unpredictable.
Another way to test to see if the rates are reasonable is the JPA could go out for a competitive bid on the service, and that would determine where it is in the marketplace as well. I'd give you a point of reference.
But if we lock into a 20-year agreement,
Prior to.
Yeah, okay, right.
So instead of negotiating an extension to the agreement, the decision would be to go to competitive bid for the services.
And the current agreement, though, has another 10 years on it. Is that right? So we're actually talking about changing it and changing the term. Another option would be to change the current agreement, but keep the term for the next 10 years, and then look at extension at that point. Right?
Yeah, but
Or something in between.
I mean, I think the point of the presentation is that if the company is going to invest $9 million in the sustainable upgrades and and all of these sustainable features, there in order to avoid a 4.5% rate increase, they need to be able to amortize it over time.
Okay.
Right. Well, I don't think there's much I can add to it. To me, you have to keep in mind the environmental impacts, which here are very good, positive, and very unclear there's any other company out there in the competitive world that's positioned to do what this company could do. So my main concern is just with the rates and ensuring that they're just and reasonable. A good regulatory process is looking at that in the context of a non-competitive world. That's why you do it.
But I guess that, what you guys were getting at earlier, the idea of a sort of a benefit cost analysis, there may be some intrinsic benefit that we're willing to pay a little bit more for.
Sure.
Like being green, et cetera.
Sure. Absolutely.
At the
Absolutely.
expense, but I think that should be considered.
Sure.
The only other last comment I would make is, and I don't have an answer, just the way I think in terms of how I approach issues with my own businesses and things I do is, I don't know we necessarily have to accept the notion, there should be at least a discussion that the rate increase has to be linked to the extension. Now, I understand the theory behind why they're doing that, but I think the board really needs to consider why they're doing that and what the benefits are to the board and to the members of the JPA, to link them and to separate them. Because to me, it's really maybe a strategy and negotiation tool, but that should be carefully considered, I think, by the board. Do they need to be linked? What are the costs and benefits to the JPA members in separating them out?
Okay, and the meeting, by the way, is Monday at 1:30 in the Yountville Council Chambers.
Okay.
If anyone is interested.
All right.
Participating.
I mean, I can see myself the benefit in extending the agreement because it provides for a much longer period in which to depreciate the property, and you have the assurance there that you will have the length of time to depreciate it over a long period of time, which reduces your costs. I mean, that's somebody's benefit. Yeah, well, it benefits the consumer.
It benefits everybody.
It benefits everybody. But as I said, my main interest is just in making sure these rates are just and reasonable, and if it's appropriate for the city to charge for the use of its roads, that should be factored into the rates, and that needs to be worked out either between the city and the company, or the cities and the JPA back through the company, however it works. And I would assume that Calistoga and Yountville would have the same interest, maybe even the county. So I don't know there's much more we can do than say, ask good questions. All right. Anything else? With that, I'll close the public hearing and close the meeting.
Well, I would also say if anybody is interested, I'm sure the company would be happy to show you around both the facility on Whitehall Lane and the Resource Recovery Park. They're both very, very interesting places to visit, and as Jerry said, they are doing some very cool things there.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I appreciate everybody coming again.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks for a good presentation, absolutely.
Helpful.